What's going on there, YouTube? My name's T-Wiz. I'm another content creator here on YouTube, and I'm thankful for Sam for letting me post this video to his channel. Today, I'm going to be featuring a modernized version of TELE-DAD, or an interpretation of what a modern TELE-DAD deck could look like. It's actually going to be a little bit more of a fun/casual deck profile. If you guys have no clue what TELE-DAD is, I'll have a link hopefully down below in the description of this video. You guys can go check it out on my channel. I'm a channel that likes to do not only competitive but also casual content, and then I also like to go back and post nostalgic decks where you guys can see full power versions of decks, and it's just really fun, and it kind of gives a glimpse into what Yu-Gi-Oh was or what could be, and it can give you a lot of great ideas for current or future decks. And I'm a competitive player, but I think I have a really good range of experience in the game since I've been playing since 2002, and I love this game to death. And today I really am pleased to reveal this modernized TELE-DAD deck. You guys can go ahead, as I mentioned, on my channel to go check out what the 2008 format looked like. It's a very famous yet infamous format, one of the most expensive decks of all time. It was roughly between $1,000 to $1,500 for a TELE-DAD deck, and obviously today I tried to remain as true as possible, both keeping in mind that a lot of the cards just aren't what they once were. There's a lot of cards that they're just power crept. I mean, a lot of Synchros cards like Stardust aren't really that useful as much anymore. Cards like Goyle Guardian being errated. We see cards like Crush Card Virus being errated. These cards were absolute staples and just powerhouses in the format. But at the same time, we also see things like Emergency Teleport being at 2, two of them being cut out of the deck. Malicious recently went to 2 in current Yu-Gi-Oh, and Dark Arm still at 1. All these things kind of ruin a little bit of the integrity of what TELE-DAD could be in today's meta. So I did my best to kind of use what cards are available right now, and also bear in mind that links are kind of important. You kind of need them to access the extra deck, and I tried to come up with something that's very fun. I did have a few other versions, maybe on my channel in the future. You guys can come and check out some other iterations of this deck, but I'm going to be featuring this deck, main, extra, and side deck. It's complacent with the current Forbidden and Limited list. 40 card main, 15 card side, 15 card extra deck. We're gonna get into it, guys. If you guys happen to enjoy this video, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe to Sam, as well as on my channel. You guys can go check me out. Hopefully Sam will have my link down below. I'm another content creator, as I mentioned, and I just love the game. I do all sorts of content that you guys might find valuable, so we'll get right into it. This is my modern interpretation of TELE-DAD. I tried to stay as true as possible to what the roots of TELE-DAD are, but bearing in mind that a lot of cards are different from what they once were, and what they can do. So first and foremost, of course, you know, in any TELE-DAD deck, we gotta include Dark Arm Dragon. It's at 1 right now. Back in the day, we had priority on ignition effects. We no longer have that. This card's at 1, which means obviously you're not really gonna have any easy way to access it. You kind of have to hard draw it. But we are playing a lot of great draw power cards that are still available in today's meta, in today's game, that were available even during the time of TELE-DAD, that will allow you to hopefully draw into this card easily and control your graveyard to be able to take full advantage of it. It's one of my favorite boss monsters of all time, and definitely one of the coolest looking boss monsters of all time. And fortunately, recently we got Stratos unbanned. Stratos was the best +1 at the time in the original TELE-DAD format, that whole era, even prior to that during D80 Return. Just an amazing card. Now that it's legal, you can play it. And unfortunately, the downside of that is now that Malicious recently went to 2. This is pretty much just for Link format. I still play the double Malicious in this deck, and keep in mind, you could very easily turn this deck into like a Dark Warrior Turbo Dot deck, kind of like what Gokis are, or really kind of the Rongo decks. But I really want to keep it a little bit more fun, because everyone's seen Rongo Turbo and the Dark Warriors and Gokis, and in this deck I really just wanted to stay as true as possible to the TELE-DAD aspect, where it's a lot of dark, powerful cards, but also complemented well by a huge draw engine, a few tuners, and then finally just some cards that allow you to put those big monsters on board, and just a slew of Destiny Hero monsters, and Malicious allows you to do just that. It's a great synchro fodder, great aspect or a card to discard for Destiny draw, and just one of the best Destiny Heroes you could have. Being at 2 kind of hurts, but nonetheless, I did replace the 3rd Malicious with a 2nd Destiny Hero, Diamond Dude. If you guys are unfamiliar with what Diamond Dude is, he's basically a monster that allows you during your turn to excavate the top card of your deck. If it's a spell, a normal spell, you can basically activate that effect the following turn without actually paying the cost. If it's anything but that, it goes to the bottom of your deck. So this card's great for pretty much just filtering through your deck. I believe there's 12 targets you could potentially hit with this, and if you're hitting something like Pot of Desires, which is obviously a newer card, but also at the same time older cards like Destiny Draw, you're able to get those effects without banishing 10 cards or discarding card. So these cards are fantastic in this deck. Definitely kind of just stays true to what a lot of the Destiny Hero monsters did for TELE-DAD. Similarly, I play 1 copy of Destiny Hero Plasma. Plasma was more so used during Deity Return, not as much during TELE-DAD, but I think it's complemented very, very well in this deck because I do play Scapegoats, which you guys will see. We had Scapegoat at 1 at the time, and now Scapegoat is at 2. It was at 3 not too long ago, much like Malicious, but Plasma is not only another name, but it's a walking skill drain on legs. This card's fantastic. You can basically special summon it by tributing 3 monsters you control, which is very easy. You can actually tribute your goat tokens, even though under normal circumstances you can't tribute them, but this is for a tribute summon, or a tribute special summon rather. So it's kind of interesting in that regard. This card allows you to essentially relinquish something or 1,000 Eyes restrict a monster and prevent all your opponent's monsters' effects from being active. And this guy gains a fantastic boost. He's also a Destiny hero and a Dark for Allure of Darkness, as well as Destiny draw. So this card's extremely great in this deck. Just another name. Really, cards like Doomlord, Fearmonger, a lot of the other cards that were used both during Deity Return and TELE-DAD more specifically aren't as great right now, and they just aren't as impactful in the meta at all. So of course I try to pick the most impactful cards, and I really just try to keep the Destiny Hero engine as short and sweet as possible. So that's it for the Destiny Hero lineup. We'll move on to some of the tuners. Originally, the deck played a multitude of 3 emergency teleports complemented by 3 Kreebons. Occasionally, you would see the Tecton copy of Psychic Commander, but with teleport being at 1, it really just wasn't that great to play 3 Kreebons. It also really isn't that great to play Psychic Commander in this deck. There's no real way to take full advantage of this, and really, this is probably the one weakest card in the deck because it doesn't interact too well with anything else. The only real way to get this out is either teleport, bring it back from the graveyard with any of your extenders, or simply just normal summon it. So it's far less impactful. The effect doesn't come up as often because usually players will clear the board, but Kreebons is still the original, one of the first 2 original main tuners of the TELE-DAD deck, and there was just no way I could build a fun concept deck with this without including it, and just a super important monster. Now, a card that was released during the second coming of TELE-DAD, I would call it, during the Crossroads period, and you guys can learn more about the different eras and how TELE-DAD evolved as a deck on my channel, is Plague Spreader Zombie. Initially, it didn't have it, in Duelist Genesis, but come Crossroads of Chaos, this card is fantastic. Probably the best tuner in this deck that you can actually fully utilize, because you can dump this with cards such as Dark Grepher or Armageddon Knight, which is fantastic. It just allows you to potentially top deck any other cards you don't want to have in your hand if you happen to have a Malicious in your hand. But it also allows you just to get multiple synchros on the field if you happen to already have a Link monster on the field established. And it's really just the most accessible tuner in the deck. So that's really the reason why I play it. But you have to be aware of the fact that in today's game, there's so many different ways to deal with cards like this, much like back in the day with Wing Blast, kind of dealing with this and handicapping this card. You could very well easily lose a game if you use it at the inopportune moment and if your opponent has the correct answer. So be very, very careful when using Plague Spreader Zombie. Armageddon Knight, it was used occasionally as a one-of. It wasn't as popular as it is today. Naturally, it's at 1, so we can only play 1, but it's just a great card to use in conjunction with 3 Dark Greffers. The original TELE-DAD deck usually just played 1 of this, to dump Maliciouses. And then, of course, if you look back even to prior formats such as Deity Return, they would dump stuff like Dasher. You would see them dumping stuff like Disc Commander. Now, a lot of people confuse the differences between TELE-DAD and Deity Return. DAD Return was pretty much Dimension Fusion, return from the different dimension. Basically, TELE-DAD, but without the synchros. And then TELE-DAD was the deck that came after Gladiator Beast went on their huge hot streak. Basically just 13 straight jumps, if I'm not mistaken. The longest winning streak of any competitive deck of all time. And one of my favorite decks of all time. TELE-DAD was basically what Duelist Genesis brought us when they introduced that very first synchro mechanic, and Dark Grepher was just a great card to load up your grave with a slew of darks for Dark Armed, but also just give you that free accessibility. Now, back in the day, we did have 3 Rotas during that format. Most people only played 2, so this was much easier to get into, but playing 3 Greffers and 1 Rota right now is absolutely fine. You can draw and dig for this quite easily. Definitely one of the most important cards of this deck. If you really wanted to make this deck a little bit more competitive than what I have here today, you could very easily splash in some danger cards, Nessies, Jackalopes, some Tsuchinokos potentially, as well as maybe the Phantom Knight engine, but at the end of the day, that kind of just becomes a little bit closer to the Dark Warrior Turbo deck of today, as well as the Rongo variants out there, so keep that in mind. I kind of wanted to just keep this a little bit more fun and casual based, but you could very well easily make this deck closer to any of those top meta decks out there. Some of the newer cards that I just had to include cards such as Destrudo, Zephyros the Elite, Steam the Cloak. These cards are just amazing dark monsters that allow you to generate a token, get a free monster on board, as well as get another free monster on board using Destrudo. Allows you to make some powerful synchros such as Black Rose, F.A. Dawn Dragster, etc. Just amazing card. All these cards are very easily dumpable and accessible with Dark Refer, and they just complement the deck quite well. There's definitely some cool applications to Zephyros in this deck. There aren't really too many cards you're going to be bouncing, but there's definitely some cool applications with it nonetheless. Cloak is predominantly just useful for getting out some of the link monsters because it does generate that token, and you sometimes need links. That's one of the biggest issues with this deck. You can't just have it be a synchro deck. You need link monsters if you're going to try and put multiple synchros on the board, and these cards are just pretty much useful for that regard, and just some extenders. And then lastly, for the final main tuner of the deck is a single copy of Glow Up Bulb. One card that I omitted from the deck, this is a 40 card main, is Foolish Burial, and that's probably a card you could include if you'd like to have more accessibility for this, which is something I'd probably consider doing. But I definitely wanted to keep the deck at 40 just because you really want to draw Dark Armed and, you know, have that nostalgia factor go off. But Glow Up Bulb's great. Make some free tuners with it. You can make that Formula Synchron or really any of the other cards that are newer, much more high impact synchros over the course of a game. And of course, if we get like Needle Fiber or anything, this card will be much, much better with a deck like this. And finally, I did decide to add some hand traps in this deck. Back in the deck, we would in TELE-DAD, you would see stuff like Triple Solemn Judgment, Double Wing Blast, maybe a Torrential Mirror Force, even though they're at 1. A Trap Dust Shoot and a Crush Card Virus, so it'd be a relatively short and sweet trap lineup, just a high impact trap lineup until the end of the format, in which case people just started to use cards like Royal Oppression. But traps aren't really as good right now, so I kind of just decided to switch those up and just play hand traps. So the hand traps I'm opting to use are a double copy of Ash Blossom, double copy of Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion, and finally 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. The only like real trap in the deck, but hand trap nonetheless. I try to just kind of keep about the same ratio of traps that we would normally play. So this could be 3 Solemns, this could be you know, the Double Wing Blast, the Crush, the Dust Shoot, and maybe like a couple other traps. And I just wanted some defense for this deck because I didn't want to get completely blown out if I happen to play anything a little bit of a higher caliber than this deck. So I did try and keep that short and sweet to the point. Of course, if you don't have access to any of these cards because they're out of your budget, you could very easily replace them with maybe some other cards. You could even replace them with something like a Brilliant Fusion Engine if you'd really like to, which is something that I also considered. Or maybe even some Cyber Valleys with Mind Controls, which is another kind of Valley-Dad aspect that was tried out back in the day. They could very easily try out with this deck as well. For the spells, the iconic draw card that is 3 Destiny draws, one of the most iconic draw cards of all time, being able to discard a you know, all the Destiny Hero monsters to get 2 free draws is great. It is an even draw. It's not like something like Pot of Desires where it is technically a +1, but this card's fantastic. You're almost never going to see multiples of this. You might see like 2 of it over the course of a game, which is fine. You could very easily, you know, banish them with Pot of Desires or discard them if you ever need to. But nonetheless, 3 Destiny draws complemented as well by 3 Allure of Darkness, another card that was at 3 and is still currently at 3 in the competitive meta right now. Allure of Darkness, just more draw power for this deck. This is all just standard stuff that TELE-DAD played. And a card that wasn't out back then, of course, is Pot of Desires. This card's really good with Diamond Dude. In some of my testing, some of my fun matches with friends, I was able to just hit Diamond Dude or Pot of Desires off of Diamond Dude and literally next turn just draw 2 free cards, just like a Pot of Greed, without banishing 10 cards. So this is really cool. I didn't want to go to 3 just because I didn't want to literally just clog up my deck with tons of draw cards, because now there's just definitely some other options, and I didn't want to banish cards like Dark Armed and the 1 Teleport and then just not have more accessibility to some of the cards that I already have access to. Next, I played double copy of Scapegoat. I think this card's a little bit more important back in the day. This was played mostly as a 1-of, if at all. Scapegoat is definitely a lot better right now. Allows you to access some free link monsters just by setting it. It allows you to both have a defensive card as well as an offensive card, either to produce links or just when your opponent attacks you. You could potentially make some cool Saryuja plays with this. Making link monsters is a little bit difficult in this deck in the sense that you know, the link monsters that we run are kind of scarce, and that's simply because I tried to include a good balance of links and synchros for what the deck is. And I didn't want to just stray in the, you know, in the lane of link monsters. So you guys will see that once we get to the next deck. But Scapegoat is a fantastic spell in this deck. And then unfortunately, the single copy of Emergency Teleport. This card's at 1, and you know, I have to include it. It's TELE-DAD. It wouldn't be TELE-DAD without, you know, the teleport Dark Armed aspect. So it is a 1-of. You could also very easily, as a hand trap, choose to play something like a single copy of Ghost Ogre or just copies of Ghost Ogre, because you can get out Ghost Ogre with Teleport, which is a really cool concept I had where I was playing 2 Ash, 2 Ghost Bell, 2 Impermanence, and 1 Ogre. But Ogre as a whole, I don't really like it that much. I did just like being able to get it off Teleport. So that was kind of unique. It kind of gives you just an additional hand trap or disrupt if you ever need it. And then some extenders that I play are a copy of Monster Reborn, World Legacy Succession, and Soul Charge. Just amazing cards, help you extend your game, get those powerful monsters on the field from your graveyard, and have that additional recursion. Definitely having something like Soul Charge is just insane. If you ever hit this off of Diamond Dude's great. You know, any of these cards, honestly, hitting them off Diamond Dude, it's free. And then finally, the single copy of Rodent's cards at 1 right now for obvious reasons. I can't run more, and that is a 40 card main deck. We will move on to the extra deck right now. The extra deck, as I mentioned, is 15 cards. I tried to improve it and kind of take out some of the less impactful synchros. I feel cards like Stardust and whatnot is on it, you know, as true to as they are to the TELE-DAD deck. They're just really not that impactful. You could very easily, if you wanted to play this deck or build it yourself, go ahead and feel free to add them and do it yourself. But I tried to pick some of the cards that I think are more impactful. So cards such as Formula Synchron, this is great with Glow Bulb. It didn't come up as often, but whenever you have Glow Bulb, and really if you want to include something like Foolish Burial, which in hindsight I probably would, I would probably drop maybe like an Impermanence for that Foolish Burial, just to have more accessibility for that Glow Bulb. But you can make this and then use this to make anything else during your turn, which is kind of cool, you know, with Scapegoat, etc. The only level 6 Synchro that I use is Coral Dragon. I was thinking about running HTS Scythemoth as an out to some of the Thunder Dragon monsters that are really powerful right now, but Thunder Dragons is a really bad matchup anyway, so having, you know, a random HTS Scythemoth game 1 isn't as impactful. So I kind of just chose to, you know, allow my side deck to try and compensate for some of those issues. Coral Dragon's great, allows you to load up your graveyard and pop some free cards, and is a tuner itself. The 7s that I use are Black Rose and FA Dawn Dragster. These are very easily makeable. Keep in mind, you do also have some additional tuners in the form of Ghost Bell and Ash Blossom. They are tuners, they themselves, so you could theoretically use them if you ever needed to, but predominantly you're going to be making these cards with cards such as Destrudo for the most part. There's just some board wipes and lockdowns if you ever need it. Probably the most powerful, I would say, of the level 8 synchros that I play is Cyframe Lord Omega. You guys know how crazy this card is, being able to rip cards out of your opponent's hand. Probably the best one overall because it's just such a versatile level 8 synchro. If there was multiples, I would definitely be playing like multiples of it. It's just I don't really have the room for it. And then finally, you can put cards back in your graveyard, or potentially even shuffle back a Dark Armed if it ever, you know, goes to the grave. Just some cool niche plays you could do with Omega. I really like that aspect to it. And then the last few are Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend. This card is an absolute blowout in some circumstances. Scrap Dragon's probably one of the weakest ones, the weakest level 8s, but I think it just has a lot of utility, popping free cards potentially. You could make use of leftover goat tokens, make use of dead D draws, etc. Just a lot of cards you might not be able to potentially take full value out of, and Scrap Dragon just allows you to do that. And then finally, the one card that was actually out during TELE-DAD among all of these other than Black Rose was actually Thought Ruler Archfiend. And the reason I'm playing this compared to a lot of the other synchros, like Colossal and so on and so forth, and Goyo, of course, are just because cards like this, while they might not be good against most matchups, it's actually surprisingly good against the Striker matchup. But you can make this card so easily because they can't Widow Anchor it, they can't Afterburner it, they have a lot of targeting spells, so you can just plop this card down, beat over one of their Link monsters or their Ray or whatever else they might have, and once that happens, you can very, very easily gain some life and have a monster on the field that they'll struggle to deal with without making any of their links. So keep that in mind. That's it for the synchros. Very short and sweet lineup. Of course, back in the day, it would pretty much just be 15 synchros. But for the Link monsters, I run a copy of Link Karibo, a copy of Wee Witch's Apprentice. You can actually replace this with the new generic guy, the Land Sephiroth or whatever it is, the 2 diagonal arrows pointing down the generic guy. I just like this because it allows you to add back Dark Armed or really any other dark you might need in your hand, maybe a Destiny hero for that Destiny draw, but you could very easily replace this if you really wanted to in your extra deck. You really just need something. The other guy's a little bit better with Scapegoat because you can make it with Scapegoat, if I'm not mistaken, as long as it's you know, it's generic, or you could, you know, use Mrs. Radiant simply because, you know, you could take advantage of those Earth monsters that Scapegoat produces. But for the most part, everything in your deck is pretty much dark, so usually you could make Wee Witch's Apprentice first, and it's not really that much of an issue. But I do also play some of the Nightmare monsters, so I play Cerberus, Phoenix, and Unicorn. These are just the most utility-based monsters, allowing you to discard cards, pop cards, spin cards, draw cards, of course, and just, you know, have some free space with the Link monsters. And then the only 4s that I play are a copy of Saryuja, which is actually really good in this deck, very easy to bring out in most cases. And finally, just for some OTK potential, a Boral Sword Dragon, which is cool in this deck. You can, you know, change the position of your Go tokens, any of your other weak monsters potentially that you have on the board that you just don't need to take full advantage of, you know, lingering Krebons. lingering, you know, cards in general that are on the board, potentially something such as a Diamond Dude or, you know, other cards along those lines. So this is really good. I think this lineup is pretty straightforward for the most part. You guys can change that up as you wish. We'll move on to the side deck. The side deck is probably the most competitive part of this deck, simply because I made it just to beat everything else, or try and accommodate for the shortcomings of this deck, and I tried to kind of just implement what a standard side deck of today's meta would look like. So naturally, I play the triple evenly matched. This is for Strikers, Thunder Dragons, Altergeist, really just any of the top matchups right now. For Altergeist, I play 3 copies of Red Reboot, naturally just to try and body them with that, you know, all their backers that they have. And then to deal with them as well as Strikers, I also have 3 copies of Twin Twisters. There isn't really too much backer removal in the main deck, so I kind of had to, you know, defer that into the side deck, which is great because you could discard a Dark, load up a graveyard if need be. And then the most versatile card in the side deck is 3 copies of Dino Wrestler Pankratops, of course. This card is really great right now, just such a versatile monster, being able to pop something. The 3rd copy of Ash Blossom and Joyous Springs, and then the last 2 cards I have in my side deck are a copy of Abyss Dweller. This is really just for dangers, any of the Goki Dark Warrior stuff that interacts with the graveyard, because you can just very easily just bring out, you know, Abyss Dweller, bring out maybe like another big monster and just blow them out and just keep attacking, because they can't do much under this. And then finally for Thunder Dragons, and just rogue decks, I play that copy of Borreload Dragon, because this is that's kind of a tough matchup for you. So I do have the Borreload to hopefully try and pick apart some of their monsters if need be, in conjunction with evenly matched. So that rounds off my side deck, and that rounds off the main extra and side for this kind of modernized interpretation of TELE-DAD. Of course, as I mentioned, it's very difficult to play a deck like this in today's meta. This, maybe you can pull it off against your friends' fun decks, or potentially against you know, any of those like local duels. You probably won't be able to take a deck like this and take it to like a regionals or a YCS and expect to do well, just because of the very nature of the decks today and just how power crept a deck like this is. But I think you can very much so have fun with a deck like this. If you guys definitely want to go check out that original authentic TELE-DAD deck profile, the authentic Lightsworn decks, any other old school deck. I pretty much profile every old school deck on my channel, as well as a lot of current decks. As I mentioned, I do play competitively, so you guys will be able to take a lot, you know, a lot of advantage of those deck profiles, those topical discussions that I do, breakdowns, etc., on my channel, and really enjoy them, you know, to their fullest extent. And of course, as I mentioned, you can play any of the old cards if you wish, you know, cards like Goya or Rodud, but there's a lot of old cool cards. Unfortunately, we can't really take advantage of multiple copies of these, you know, the Dust Shoot, of course, the multiple Solemns, but these are some example cards that you would see in a TELE-DAD deck. If you guys want to go see that, go check it out. I'll have a clip on the screen, probably the screenshot of the deck that you guys can check out. Make sure you guys thank Sam for allowing me to post this video. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. Sam, hopefully you guys go check out my channel. I really appreciate it. I'm really trying to kind of break through that bubble finally, and be a much more impactful content creator for you guys to enjoy. So I'll see you guys hopefully on my channel. Thank you to Sam once again. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe to this video to show him that you guys appreciate him first and foremost, as well as myself. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys hopefully on my channel. Take care. Twiz signing off at Team Sam's channel. I'll see you guys next time.
I feel like Usain in the cheetah print. Talk fresh game, I don't need a minute. R.I.P. the game, I need a minute. Okay, let's proceed with it. I'm in the house, got the deed with it. These bozos always sneak this and they taking shots. I'ma keep with it like no, this league business.